Hi everyone. So I wanted to do a video on the protests in Iran that's going on and give a little bit of historical perspective on where we are and really point to a figure who has traditionally united Iranians of all different faith traditions um, and use his life and his approach to dealing with disagreement as an inspiration for all of us, whether we're in the States or in Iran or Canada or UK or American, Iranian, both Israeli, Zoroastrian, Muslim, Jewish, Christian, um, to use this example to help us um, to unite together under the banner of kindness, respect, uh, dialogue, um, and um, logic. And so the person that I'm talking about, his name is Reza. Okay. So many of you know someone named Reza from Iran. Obviously, now in the news, we have the leader of the opposition from the Pahlavi dynasty, Reza Pahlavi. So I'm talking about the original Reza. So the one that all the Iranian Rezas or Ali Rezas are named after. Okay. So who was Ali Reza, or who was Imam Reza, as some call him, or just, and this is not like you don't have to, this is not a polemical diatribe, right? So I'm just talking about um, historical biography that's been verified by modern historical scholarship from the top Western universities. All right, so who was Ali Reza, the original? So he was a great, 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 great grandson of the Prophet Muhammad. And so he lived under the Abbasid Caliphate. Um, and the Abbasid Caliphate was the Islamic empire of the time, right? So first you had the Prophet Muhammad, and then you had what's traditionally been called the four rightly guided caliphs by most mainstream historians. Then you had and those four were Abu Bakr, Omar, Usman, and Ali. And then after that, you had the Umayyad dynasty that ruled the Islamic Empire. And then after the Umayyads, you had the Abbasids. Okay. And so uh, Ali Reza or Imam Reza was born during the Abbasid Caliphate. So his dad, Musa, which, by the way, means Moses in Persian. Okay. So the seventh Shia Imam, his name is Moses. Okay, so I just want to let that register for you guys. So a lot of people, look at these distinctions between religious tradition. Oh, Jewish and Muslims, they hate each other, or the Jews hate the Muslims hate the Jews. Or let's look at our shared historical heritage and recognize some of these commonalities, right? So the seventh Shia Imam, his name was Moses, and this is Reza's dad. Okay. So Moses was in jail during the time of the Abbasid Caliphate. So the Abbasids wanted to show that they were close to um, the prophet's family, as they call it, or the prophet's household, of which Moses was a leading representative. but then they also didn't want for the actual household of the prophet's leadership to run the country, because that's what they wanted to do. But they wanted to give the perception that they were close to them. And so that was their claim to power. But in order to actually preserve their power, they couldn't have the leaders or the imams of the prophet's household just free because they would attract followers. And so Moses was put in jail, and then his son Reza was in jail also, or Ali Reza. And when Moses was most likely killed by the Abbasid Caliph, Reza became the leader of the Shia community. Okay, so the Shias are the ones who believed that the Prophet Muhammad had designated a successor, namely Ali, and that what transpired after the Prophet's death was a form of corruption and not listening to the Prophet's message. And so they see that all the corruption and the misinterpretation of religion that came after the life of the prophet stemmed in large part from the people not listening to the prophet's message to make Ali as their main leader. So even though you've got the four, as I said, it's traditionally called rightly guided caliphs, and then the Umayyads and the Abbasids, you had people whom were entrusted, according to the Shia, with authority from the Prophet through Ali and then to his designated successors, which traditionally was within their family. And so um, Moses and Reza, they were they were part of that line, right? Part of that leadership and preserving that prophetic message line. And so the Abbasids, they knew that if they were to be let to go run around and be free, that they would attract a lot of followers. They were very charismatic, and so they kept them under wraps in jail. But then, after the Caliph Harun al-Rashid was after he passed away, so in his will, he gave part of the Abbasid Empire, which was the Islamic Empire, he gave part of it to one son, Amin, which was like the Medina, Baghdad area. And then he gave another part, which was the Khorasan area, part of which was what's today, and part of it was in Iran, to his other son, Ma'mun. And so these two brothers they were given about half or so each. And Ma'mun wanted to make a claim to become the leader of the entire Abbasid Empire. And so, and okay, and I should also say what I'm stating here is history based off of modern academic standards, right? So, um, like for example, you have scholars from top universities, Harvard, University of Chicago, Oxford, that looked at this history in light of modern scholarship and recognize these, what I'm stating. Okay, so a prominent historian, if you guys want to look into this in more detail, who studied the succession to Muhammad, the Prophet Muhammad, and the life of the Shia leaders or the Shia Imams. His name is Wilfred Madelung. He was a professor at the University of Chicago, later a professor at the University of Oxford, and he was a German scholar who later came to the States and then to England and wrote a number of books that evaluated the historicity and the authenticity of various claims and put forward his his analysis. He's one prominent example. There are many who've done the same or similar, but just wanted to give you that context. So during the life of Reza, Ma'mun was the caliph. And Reza was in jail, but then when Ma'mun was going to be the caliph of, like I said, the Khorasan region of the Islamic Empire, which was the Iranian Persian-speaking area that many were had converted to Islam with, I want to say, some degree of pressure, but not necessarily um, with it wasn't like a complete force, but I want to say that there was some degree of pressure, and those who stayed as Zoroastrians, they weren't treated equally under the law. Um, and then you had the Christians and the Jews, and you had atheists. I mean, you had like today, like atheists that were part of the empire, and they were living, but it was, they didn't have the equal rights that the Muslims did. Okay. And so Ma'mun, he wanted to establish more authority for himself. And so what he did was what he said was, I want to release Reza from jail so that I can show the people, one, that I'm close to him, and I want to appoint him as my successor, because he knew that the Shia in the Iranian region, they had a lot of support. And so not just in the Iranian region, but definitely they had it there too. And so he wanted to gain public support for himself. And so it was interesting that he chose to make Reza his successor. Now, Reza didn't fully comply. So he said, okay, but under several conditions. And the Ma'mun said, what? He said that if I become the leader after you, I cannot have any political power. I cannot have any power over the military, over the economy, none of that. And so it was kind of like a catch-22. And so Mahmoud was like, well, I mean, like, so he wasn't like formally rejecting him, but in essence, he was basically saying, I'm not going to play by these rules. But if that's what you want to do, then you can do it. Just don't expect me to be running your government. And so this shows that Reza was not after political power. Um, it wasn't appealing to him. And so Ma'mun brought Reza with him to the Khorasan region. And so, mind you, you had Zoroastrians, Christians, Jews, atheists, Muslims of different schools of thought, Sunni, Shia. And for those who weren't Shia, they were expecting Reza to be have that same sense of, I guess you can say, condescending approach towards the non-Muslims that they had experienced by um, under Harun al-Rashid and prior Muslim rulers. But they were very surprised that when they saw Reza, he was very respectful and kind and um, behaved very like ethically with them. And so they're like, wait a minute, this is not like what we're used to. Like this is not like the Islam that we have come to um, experience. And so they gained an affinity for Reza, for the leader of the Shia community. And what Ma'mun did is he said, you know what? I know like Reza is really beloved by a lot of people, and I am an intellectual, meaning I, Ma'mun, the caliph. He studied books and he was really interested in philosophy and other like intellectual topics. And he said, you know what? I'm going to bring I'm going to bring the level of respect that the people have for Reza down. Like, I'm going to decrease their level of respect for him. How am I going to do that? I'm going to invite people from the Jewish tradition, the Christian tradition, the Zoroastrian tradition, atheist rationalists, and different Sunni Muslim scholars to come and debate with him. And he's going to falter. And so it's going to put a damper on his reputation. And so I'll be able um, to build more popularity for myself. And so that was his intention. And so what he did is when he invited Jewish scholars, what happened, like I said, this is all, there's a historical record for this. You see independent sources for this from, not just Shia, but also Sunni historians, Muslim, non-Muslim historians, Jewish, Christian. So what he did with the Jewish theologians when they debated theology was he would listen to the Jewish rabbi, and when he would and he would never interrupt the Jewish rabbi, and which showed a mark of his character. Um, and when he debated with him, he would quote passages from the Torah with the Jewish rabbi. So he would say, according to your Torah, it says such and such about God, or it says such and such about prophets after Moses. Um, and so he would only speak a language that he knew his counterpart, his debate counterpart, would accept. Because his aim was not to try and prove someone wrong, but it was rather to connect with someone and to help them gain a better insight using a language, using a context that they already accepted. So this was the approach of Reza. Um, he did the same thing with the Christian theologian. So the Christian theologian came and would talk about religion with him, would talk about uh, the Trinity with him, and they would have discussions. And Reza would only quote passages from the New Testament with the Christian theologian to make his point, or and to make his various points. So he wouldn't be quoting from the Quran or citing his own family's authority, but he would say, okay, so you accept the Bible, so let's look at what the Bible says. And that's how he would approach it. Similarly with the Zoroastrians, right? So there's some I've noticed sometimes in the Muslim community, there's questions of, oh, are the Zoroastrian considered Muslim or not? And I'm sorry, not Muslim, people of the book or not, excuse me, Ahl al-Kitab, as they say. And for Reza, he would treat the Zoroastrians just like he would treat, in these debates, he would treat the Jews, the other Muslims, the Christians. He would treat everyone equally, no matter what their background, whether they're Shia, Sunni, he would interact with them at the same level of respect. And so with the Zoroastrians, he would speak from their tradition of light and darkness, and uh, citing their rich heritage, to connect more deeply with the Zoroastrian leader or priest or intellectual. And similarly with atheist philosophers, how would he connect with them, you ask? Because they didn't have a religious book that he could reference. So he knew that the atheist philosophers valued intellect. And so he would just stick to intellect, logical reasoning, because he knew that was their source of authority. And so this is the Reza that is probably the most popular male name in Iran. At least it was until probably like 20 years ago, but one of the most popular names in Iran. And he's someone that both the current regime accepts, right? Because they proclaim a Shia authority, right? At least in theory. So practice is a different question, but at least in theory, they proclaim that authority. And then you have the Pahlavi dynasty. Every single one of the Pahlavi leaders. The first one, his name was Reza Shah. His son, his name was Mohammad Reza. And Mohammad Reza's son, who's the current Pahlavi that the US and Israel are looking to bring to power in Iran, his name is Reza Pahlavi. So they're all named after this original Reza who united Iranians of different faith traditions in that they could all um, appeal, like they could all connect with his approach to life, right? So he was someone that was very well respected. In fact, I know that the Christian priest even said that if there were to be a prophet after Jesus, it would this man Reza is most worthy. So from his experience with Reza, that is what the Christian priest who debated him said. And And so I bring this up because he's a very uniting figure. And he's the reason why Iranians have this nationalism about Iran, that Iran is different from the rest of the Muslim world in that um, and 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 you hear both, Muslims say this, Jews say this, Christians say this, Zoroastrians say this, Baha'is say this, in that there's a connection about being Iranian that people love, that there's this warmth, there's this sense of generosity that people appreciate in their culture, that they share both amongst themselves and with others. And that is heavily inspired by Reza in how he treated people of different faiths. So his approach laid a foundation for in the culture for people to connect to people just based off of the fact that they were from Iran. And it wasn't the boundaries per se, that the boundaries of Iran that necessarily created that. So it wasn't like a nationalism in the sense of you're from our land, you're superior, but it was you've been exposed to this religious pluralism, if you will, this interreligious respect and kindness that was very much inspired by Reza, that it permeated the society, that after him, people in the Khorasan region which was, dominated the Iranian era of the Muslim empire, they realized that there's no reason for us to look down upon any other person from any other faith, or whether they have a faith or not, um, because they saw that they had a living example of someone who was exposed in this situation, and who treated people with loving kindness and respect and dignity. And and so this was the circumstance in which he was presented. And so it really left a lasting impression on the Iranians, because they were, like I said, under the Abbasid Empire, they were used to having, those from the other faiths, they were used to having like a little bit of a second class um, status in society. So, I mean, when they saw Reza and the way that he treated them, they were flabbergasted. Like they were really impressed. And so whether they became his active followers or not, I mean, it wasn't like that. It wasn't like people were saying, okay, I want to be a Shia of the Imam or anything. I mean, some people did, right? But a lot of people didn't, but they just had this respect for him. And so that permeated Iran. And so I see him as a uniting figure. Um, a lot of Sufi traditions, they go back through Reza to the Prophet Muhammad. There's a famous Sufi named Ma'ruf Karhi, and he was a disciple of Reza. And there was a heart-to-heart transmission from Reza to Ma'ruf Karhi, to subsequent Sufi masters after him from different lineages. And and many of them are prevalent in Iran. And so he's a uniting figure. And it's why, his shrine, even to this very day, attracts so many followers, or so many pilgrims, if you will, because they've experienced, that love from him, and they recognize just the greatness of him. And so this is you could think of it as, a very loving, kind human with who had epistemic humility, intellectual humility, was very respectful and valued action and character and the way we present ourselves over beliefs. That was a hallmark of Reza's understanding of Islam, was that um, beliefs are only good insofar, they're only helpful insofar as they can manifest in our character. The most important thing is how we behave in society, whether we are kind, whether we're respectful, whether we are just and fair. This was the this was the hallmark of the Islam that was taught by Reza, and that resonated and continues to resonate so deeply with Iranians. Um, I mean, when I say continues, at least for many in the population, yes, there are many who have been put off completely by Islam, due to the actions of the current government. Um, but we see that Reza's actions are different from those who proclaim to be his followers in some respect, right? So he definitely stood for justice, social justice, but as far as how we treat other people, um, there was no there was no hierarchy with Reza. Everyone was worthy of respect, whether you believed in God or not, whether you were a Christian, Jew, Muslim, whatever your beliefs are. For him, human dignity was primary. And he learned this from the Prophet Muhammad. So it's not like he came and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to one up Muhammad and do it this way. He learned this from the Prophet Muhammad. So um, this is what the Iranians experienced through him. And that's why his he is so beloved and why he's so popular. And it's why I bring him up as a uniting figure that no matter where we stand on the current Iran protests, he's someone that we can look at these types of actions and this approach to life and say, hey, you know what? It doesn't matter if, I'm a supporter of the current government or a supporter of the Pahlavis or I just, I want the Iranian people to be free or I want the US to be out of Iran or Israel to be out of Iran, or like Palestine. It doesn't matter where we stand. If we want to approach this from a way that is inspiring and creates a better world, we can start with ourselves and how we treat other people. And Reza was one of the best examples that we have, who was put in a situation where he had to put it into practice in debates with prominent people from all these different traditions and and people were amazed at his character, his calmness, and his logic, his reasoning, where he would reference the intellectual um, authority of the person that he was conversing with. So um, I hope you found this helpful. I really appreciate your time, and I look forward to discussing with you again soon. Thank you.